Start recording. It's recording now. Great. I'm really happy everybody's here tonight. And if you're catching this on a replay, welcome as well. So Sally Hutchinson is somebody I've known, I think, almost since I moved back to Nova Scotia, and is one of the most inspiring and wise women I know on so many different levels. And I describe her as somebody who you can sit and have a deepest belly laugh with, and also somebody who can hold space for you like nobody I know. So I'm so happy that, Sally, you're here tonight, and you're going to talk to us a little bit about trusting your gut, about creativity, about art, and about this practice called somatic experiencing. So Sally, can you give us a little sort of intro of who you are?
I will. Thank you for that, Tara. It's hard to know where to start with that. Right now, I'm a painter, and I do something called somatic experiencing. I work at Second Story Women's Center, and I do some work on the side too with creativity groups. So I've got a lot of irons in the fire right now. There's a lot I can say about kind of how I got here. Which maybe we'll get into a little bit, but you know, that's my thing. I love painting. It's my love. It's my kind of balance to doing trauma work or doing work with somatic work. It keeps me here and in my body, so to speak. And I'm really honored to be here. And I'm feeling my nervous system is a little upregulated right now. just a little nervous.
I think I think that's normal, especially normally we gather in person in living rooms and in, places, so this is, I think, a little strange for most of us. So thanks for kind of stepping outside any comfort zone and getting on this Zoom call. I'd love for you to, we started off by chatting about when we talked a couple weeks ago around, how it's so important always. And I think the theme of this series, this Bright Light series, is sure to help us navigate and to get through this, experience and the season the whole world is going through right now, but also to sort of help people, equip them with skills and resources and tools that can serve them way past this global pandemic we're in right now. But, I think more than ever right now, we may need to reach for some tools to help us get through the days, get through the weeks, figure out where we're at, and to kind of ground ourselves and orient ourselves. And you and I were chatting a little bit about trusting your gut and how important that is. And sometimes that's hard, but you told me a story about when you trusted your gut once, and wonder if you could share that to kick us off.
Well, something I didn't share in the intro is that I used to own a business called Rumpelstiltskins, and that was leather characters. And I made these leather characters that just happened by accident, really. And I was doing leather work for a long time. I was a single mom, and my kids were quite small. There's one of them there right now in the middle that I'm looking at. And I was getting ready for a craft show in the Lunenburg Craft Show. And I was making all of these sort of production barrettes, like you're working there right now, just working all the time. The kitchen table, as Zoe knows, was always full of leather and stuff. And I was making these barrettes late at night. I walked away, I came back, and there was a little face there. And I think it was a moment of, trusting. I mean, it was the oddest looking thing, but at the same time, it drew me in so much. And I thought, oh my gosh, hello, I actually had a conversation. I actually spoke to it, this little face. And I started to think about ways that I started making more. Like even that night, I made 3 or 4 of these little faces. And they evolved and changed over time. But I think that moment was pivotal. If I hadn't noticed it, for one thing. If I hadn't been able to see it, there was that. And then there was, this is a really odd thing, but I'm going to do it anyway, because there was a part of me thinking this is so strange that, but there was something else that was saying, keep going, keep going. And I think I was at a place in my life where I was able to trust that, you know, I was able to trust that, just risk, I guess, too, putting that out there, because I remember those things being at the craft show that first year. And then, you know, they still get mixed reviews. Like Tara's child is terrified of the one that she has in her house. You know, they provoke people in, you know, either in a positive way, they're drawn right in, or they're pushed away. So I like that. I like that they provoke people either way. So, you know, I think that, you know, we're not often in a state where we're able to change lanes like that and just trust in that, because that was not part of the plan at all. You know, that was not part of the production plan to have these faces. But I think I sold all those faces the first show, and there was this news story. Like, there was things that happened that really validated that path for me and kept me going in that direction. And I actually managed to raise my children with that as my sole income. So it was pretty great. It was back in the days when, you know, craft shows were really booming too, and there wasn't anything online. So it was a while ago.
How did you know to try? Like, how did you trust your gut? How did you know, was it like a matter of the right time, the right place, like the right headspace you're in? Because so many of us, you know,
all of that.
We have these, and we have this, you know, internal conversation going, oh, I think this is a good idea, but oh gosh, this is wacky, this is ridiculous. And then sometimes there's just something that happens where you do listen to that and you go for it. And sometimes it works and it's a beautiful story. And, you know, sometimes we trust our gut and it doesn't work. So, like, yeah, I guess, how, you know, what led you to?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think that a lot of things came together at that point for me that were, like, I knew I didn't want to do production barrettes. It was like, oh God, this is soul sucking almost. You know, it was great doing leather work for a while, and I loved making bags, and I loved painting on bags, and I did that. But it was time consuming, and then this little face just happened, and it was, oh, that was easy. It just gave birth to itself, you know? So I think there was the ease in which it came that I listened to, and just trying them out at that one little show. There was so much support for them that I just continued with them. I don't know, maybe if I hadn't had the support at the show, or if they were completely like off the wall. And, you know, sometimes we do things and then the next day we think it's so fantastic. Like I've done paintings and I think, oh my God, I love this. And then I get up the next day and I go, what was I thinking? You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, that didn't happen with those. They were just like, to me, they were like they wanted to keep going. There was a conversation with them almost, you know?
Yeah, and it felt sort of light and maybe not easy, but like it felt like the right thing to do. And everything was kind of lining up. It sounds like the feedback was great from people. It sounds like you really enjoyed doing it versus the production. So
I think I've kind of lived my life to that point in that way, where I follow the thread, you know, like I've had the thing that got me into leather was a trip to PEI. The thing that took me from leather work into working with Katimovic, this youth group, was doing a workshop with Katimovic, and then I was a group leader with Katimovic, and it just, I followed what wanted to happen. And I think that's kind of a nice segue into somatic experiencing, because somatic experiencing involves following what wants to happen in the autonomic nervous system, what wants to happen in the body.
Right? Can you tell us, like, because some people might be on here thinking, what the heck is somatic experiencing? Like, what have I signed up for? What is this? So maybe just kind of explain briefly what that practice is.
So I mentioned that I worked at the Women's Center, at Second Story Women's Center. And what I do there, what I have been doing there for about 15 years now, is supporting women one-on-one, doing support counseling. And one of the things that I was noticing was, there was so many stories that were coming, and I the more I worked, the more I realized that just telling the story wasn't really getting people too far, right? And I had looked up online about trauma work and Peter Levine's work, which is called somatic experiencing, and I looked for training in this. This was about 6 years ago now, I think, when I first thought about it. And the training was in Germany or somewhere. So it was like, oh yeah, not going to happen. But it looked amazing to me, because it was really touched in on what I really wanted to explore, and that was working with the body. And then 2 years later, I was Googling something, and up pops, there's a somatic experiencing training near you. It's like, are you kidding me? And it was Windsor. So again, there's this happy little accident, where, okay, and it's starting in 2 months, so I took it. What it is working with the autonomic nervous system to help release or process some of what might be stuck in the body in terms of trauma, stress, overwhelm. And we do that in a way that is gentle and respectful, and it's kind of a mindfulness-based program or way of working. So we try to approach with curiosity. We're always respectful and listening for information. Just like I might sit with somebody and listen to their story, I'm now listening to their story through their body. So I'm noticing things that are going on in the body.
Okay.
Defense postures or defense mechanisms. Like, for instance, somebody might, their leg might be moving or bouncing a little bit, right? So there's some activation, there's something there. And so that might be a little bit of a flight response that's there, right? It's such a hard thing to explain. It is, we all have these responses that happen automatically. We had our physiology. If I like this story, if you think about a cat and a mouse. Anybody ever see a cat torture a mouse or chase a mouse? So you think about that little mouse, and in a moment, it gets a sense that something might be off in its environment, okay? So the ears might perk up. It might be something it hears. And in that moment, there's something that's called defense orienting that happens. So it's like, oh, what was that? Right? So you see how I did this? Mm-hmm. It would sort of do this. And they're looking around, they're listening. So their physiology is changing in that very moment. When this happens, or it sees this threat, which might be the cat, in a split second, this little creature decides, can I get away? Can I fight? First of all, can I fight this thing? I don't think so. Can I get away? So it may attempt to get away. If it's caught or if it's cornered, then those two things are not available anymore, fight and flight. But what is available is freeze. So that's this whole sort of playing dead thing that happens. If it finally does get away from that cat, if the cat goes away and decides dead stuff is not good to eat, then that little mouse gets to safety. It finally, you might watch its skin or see its skin ripple out, and that's the completion of the fight and flight response. Human beings don't typically let that complete. All kinds of things get in the way, right? What we say to ourselves, what other people do, we don't let ourselves complete that process. So somatic experiencing is helping to complete that process.
So does that mean sort of like recognizing, when you're having these thoughts or you're kind of perk up to an experience, like what's actually, you mean like actually what's happening in your body, how you're holding yourself, if your hands are clenched, if your shoulders are raised, like those are the kinds of things that you're looking for.
Those are some of the things that I might see. Yeah. I think when we're talking about present, like what's happening in the world right now, I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about this feeling like inescapable attack to some people.
Say that again.
Inescapable attack. So in other words, there's such a threat out there and we have no idea. Like this hasn't happened before. And there's so much uncertainty out there. So we might find ourselves in a default, like one of those fight, flight, or freeze might be our default from another time, right? It's kind of like, you've met people who are argumentative, right? Or there's people who are like, they want the news, they want to find out how to, we're going to deal with this virus, we're going to, those are the fighters. It's like, they're in this kind of fight mode with this thing. And then there's people who are more comfortable to be in the house and away and safe and, turning off the news, and there's some avoiding of the whole thing too, right? And so all kinds of our kind of default responses are rising up with this.
And would you say that, sorry, I was just going to say, I'm, thinking about how people are responding and how, we can go and wait, like our responses can change even with one threat, right? Like I was talking with somebody earlier today and they said I think my power came back on, possibly. The first 2 weeks of this pandemic, they were fighter. They were thinking outside the box. They were pivoting. They were being creative and go, and I'm ready. And now they are just exhausted and they don't know what to do. And they're fully just taking some time, right? So I guess that's something that, when I think of fight or flight, you sort of identify as one or the other, but you go through waves and it changes. Yeah. Depending on the hour, really.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's all normal.
Absolutely normal. And I think that that's such a good point to say. It's all normal. It's a normal response to an abnormal event. I don't know how many times I've said that in my office. Because, you know, I think sometimes there's a feeling, if there's been any trauma, that there's something terribly wrong with me. You know, this is, and there's a lot of shame that gets bound up in it. But I think it's so important to say that your responses, your autonomic nervous system's responses to what happened to you are so normal.
And they're unique to you as well.
And they're unique to you. And that's the thing. It's not going to be the same for everybody. And you know, I love that we're all saying that we're in this together. And I'd like to add that we're in this together with different responses.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have always the same responses. And the other thing that I think is really interesting is that, you know, if you went back to, there's this sort of herd mentality too with, you know, groups, and we all are gravitate to groups, and from the beginning of time, we've needed to have people around us. When we're in that sort of group, and if you think about gazelles or something, you know, they're all in a group, and there's this kind of, oh, you know, is there a threat? We're all now running. We're all in flight, right? So when we're in a group or we're with other people who don't line up with our response, it can be really difficult, right?
Yeah, it can feel
or those
isolating.
Gazelles said, "Oh no, I'm going to stop and fight." You know, the rest of them are like, "No, don't do that thing. Do this thing. We're all doing this thing." So there is that kind of, you know, we're all jockeying to get back into what is our comfortable default, right?
Yeah.
And when we're beside her, I think that's why there's so much, like I've noticed online that people get into arguments and there's a lot of intolerance, but I think it's the nervous systems, like the ways that people are navigating this naturally, that are coming up against each other. The fight, you know. So
yeah, there's a lot at play right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on.
Yeah. So, you know, when I think that one of the things that that is one of the most important things to remember right now is gentleness with yourself, that it's all okay, that you may have days that you feel like you're doing 100% and you're great, and there's other days that you just want to hide in the closet, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's so normal.
Yeah, and that can all happen in the course of an hour or a day, sometimes a morning, right?
Yeah, and I think that there's no right way to do this. Like, you know, I think we can set ourselves up a little bit when we think, you know, we read or we buy into this whole notion that now is the time I'm going to start my business, and now is the time I'm going to, you know, get all my clients, and I have time to be at home with myself. Well, even if this wasn't going on out there, it's when we're given that time that isn't our normal routine, there's so much adjusting that has to happen to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's always something that we think, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be great to have, I don't know, 4 months off and just have that time to myself, and oh yeah, no.
Yeah,
Not necessarily. It really challenges a lot of, you know, the ways that we operate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to give ourselves grace to figure out what it looks like, just because we have time. And some of us don't have time. Some of us are, you know, like your schedules and everything is changing. You know, some
Yes.
people have a lot more time. Some people have to share time. Some people are working so much. And like we talked about at the beginning, everybody's experiencing this in their own way, even if we're all in this together, as they're saying. Yeah, I think that's so important. And especially if we're spending time online, which a lot of us are spending more time online now to connect, to, you know, we fall into that comparison trap, can happen pretty easily. So I know, I wanted to see that we're losing some light here, but I think you're still brightly lit up over there, Sally.
Yeah, I moved into this room where there's light.
Okay, there is power. All right, this is great. I can see everybody now. I wonder now, Sally, if you might be able to sort of explain the exercise to everybody and kind of walk us through it. Is this a good time to go into that? We thought that, and this, you know, echoing what I said at the beginning, this is something that you can absolutely use now, but also these exercises that we're covering in these calls are things that you can implement at any time, you know, not just during a very stressful time in your life, like that everybody is kind of going through right now, but like these are things that you can use all the time. When the pandemic, you know, I keep saying when the dust settles, something else is going to happen that's going to shift you from your plan or your ideal where you're thinking you should be. So these are things that you can use all of the time. Nadine, I think, was just asking,
we need
popped
a pen
up
and
there.
Paper.
Yeah.
No, you don't. I'll go over some of the things that can be really helpful, and you might want to jot some of those down at the end, but for the exercise, you don't need anything. So there's a couple of them, but one of the things that I like to do to kind of demonstrate you know, the change in the physiology in the body is, and I will guide you through this. If it feels okay to you to play along, you can, or you can just listen. But what we want to do to start with before I get into it is choose both a mildly stressful situation that has happened to you or in your life in the last week or so. Mildly. Okay, everybody kind of have one. And the other thing you want to choose is a place or a time, even in the last little while, or, you know, where you felt safe, you felt maybe it's a place you like to go. You could imagine going to the beach or somewhere, a more resourced place. Maybe it is doing your art or whatever you like to do. Okay, so you want to have one of each of those ready. Is everybody a thumbs up to go? All right. So you can close your eyes if that feels okay, or you can leave them open and just sort of have a soft gaze. And we're going to start just by noticing where you're sitting and kind of getting a sense of the seat under you. Noticing your breath. Not changing the breath, but just noticing it, bringing attention to it. Noticing any sensations that are in the body right now. Kind of being curious. And if you were to imagine this more resourced place, or this place that you feel pretty good, pretty safe, And just as you imagine that, imagine what you see when you're there. Imagine any sounds that you hear. Imagine if there's any sensation, is there wind? Is there any sensation in your body? What do you smell? What do you taste? And what are people doing around you? If there's people. So just notice your body in response to this. Notice your breath. Notice if there's any sensation at all. Notice if there's any emotion that's there. And now we're going to leave this happier place, and we're going to move to this mildly stressful situation. And so again, noticing what you see. What are you hearing? Noticing if there is any sensation in the body. What you smell, taste, if anything. And now noticing the body now. Notice your breath. Notice if there's any difference. Just letting those sensations be there, if that's okay. And then we're going to return to our more resourced place. We're going to say goodbye to the mildly stressful situation, come back to the more resourced place. Again, noticing and engaging the senses in this experience of being in this place. And noticing the breath again, noticing any sensations, any difference that might be there. And when you're ready, just opening your eyes when it feels right. Having a little look around. And I wonder if there's anything that stood out for you there.
I can share a little bit, and I had the gift of this experience last week with you, Sally, and the same thing happened. So I noticed, for me, going to that happy place, I could notice the shift in sort of the shoulders relaxing and my mouth sort of like drooping and my eyes and my brow, like all of the things just sort of loosened.
Right.
And my breathing sort of like changed from even just normal breathing. And then when you asked us to go to the mildly stressful place, like immediately like started shifting and clenching in my brow. And yeah, it was not a very, it was such a difference. And it wasn't that long of a time from one to the other. And then to bring us back, it was like I got to that place so much faster, like immediately, like I felt like laying down and getting right in there. But it happened so much faster the second time for me, like from the, going back to that kind of grounding place after the stressful place.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything they want to share from that? Yeah, Nadine.
I'll share. I really noticed with my breath and kind of my energy, there was a very distinct kind of stopping point in the middle of my stomach for like my tense situation compared to my calming situation. And it was like when in the calming point, my breath and my energy were kind of going through my whole body. And then for the tense one, it was like a much shorter circle just to my stomach and back and kind of wow. So that was really interesting. Thank you for leading that.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me that, just thinking about those two different states, how the physiology changes. And so it's that those differences when I'm working with people to help to notice those differences, right? Because I think we operate a lot of the time from the neck up. We're not at home in the body. Often when we've had any, stress and trauma is a word that I think, it feels like this big T trauma, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. I don't think there's a human being who escapes trauma and stress and overwhelm in the world. That is just, it is what it is. So we can be aware of some of this and some of it not aware at all, of the origins of it. So I think though, when we're talking about, what can we do for ourselves? And was there anyone else who wanted to share anything from that before we move on? No? Okay. Yeah, some of the things that we can do are, as I said, gentleness with ourselves. Just gentleness. I think, human touch, I can't say enough about. And I think, even, I'll say to clients, give yourself, like putting your hand on your heart side and then around you this way. The body doesn't differentiate between another's touch and our own. So that down regulating can happen just with this holding and touching. And I think, the way that we might comfort a child, how we may be with a child who's been, hurt, fall down, this is how we might need to treat ourselves at Sally, this time especially.
Can you describe or define down regulating when you describe giving a hug?
Yeah, so when we were in that more regulated state, when you were imagining your happy place, that's kind of down regulating. It's the system was settling down, the breath was getting, deeper, and we're more in a regulated state.
So you're saying we can, instead of kind of going there, we can just give ourselves a hug.
We can hug ourselves. We can hold ourselves. We can move. Movement is incredibly helpful at this time.
What do you mean? Going for a walk or?
Going for a walk, moving, like doing Nia, for instance, which Kathleen leads. Doing any like Tai Chi, yoga, moving, even just moving, like sometimes I just put some music on and dance, like just dance around your room. Yeah. Doesn't have to be any structured event. Like I think just walking around your yard, just going out and moving, opening your arms, just.
Yeah.
It's extremely important right now to move. Some people find things like weighted blankets really helpful. If you are, experiencing some anxiety, having that weighted blanket can be really helpful. Anything like, I notice you sewing, anything like that, anything like making art just for the purpose of making art can be, and I'm not even going to call it art. Let me say this, scribbling on a page can be so helpful. Just that sensory, that hand moving on the page. I sometimes, when I work with clients, they will have a page and just be doodling on the page as we're working, because that's a real resource for them.
So not looking for any specific outcome, or just moving your hand on a piece of paper can help without even looking to make something.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
That doodling, when I started my somatic training, I sat through most of the training doodling, and it was a management for me. It's a way of managing for me, because, for me, it was difficult to be in the training. So by the end of it, I didn't need to doodle.
Wow.
But I did it at first. I doodled all the time. What else did I have here?
I know you had an exercise that you sort of the 5.
Yeah.
That's something that you want to share that we could do. So I guess to go back to the exercise that you led us through, in terms of us using that kind of going forward in our days, like, would you suggest just kind of going back and forth like that? Like if we were feeling overwhelmed or,
Yeah, no, not that as an exercise you can go to your happy place anytime. That was to demonstrate the difference in the body and the physiology and how it changed.
Yeah.
How just with the mention of that, or the going to it in our imagination, how the physiology can change. But what I mentioned before was defense orienting. And what we can do in our environment is what we call orient to our space. So in other words, we may be orienting right now to the threat, which is the virus, without really realizing we are, it's all around, it's on the news, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't go outside, or it's there all the time, sort of hovering around us. So when we can let the brain know that we're actually in safety right now, like right now in our homes, where you're sitting, where you are, if we all were to look around our environment and just take in what we see around us. And I'm doing this right now, if you want to do it too. And just take in some of the things that you see with some curiosity. Like notice the colors and the shapes, what gets your attention. Some of the things that I still have my stickers on the wall from Tara coming to visit me. If I am in defense orienting, I'm not even seeing those things. They're not even on my radar, right? But I'm going to slow down and I'm going to take in what I see around me. And right now, I'm relatively safe. And what do I hear when I'm sitting here? What are some of the sounds that I hear? So I do something called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with clients. And that is, what are 5 things that I see right now? What are 4 things that I hear? You can do this with your kids, it's great. What are 3 things that I feel in my body right now? What do I sense in my body right now? I feel the chair under me. I feel my turtleneck on my on my neck. I feel my earring against my neck. What do I taste in my mouth? And what do I smell? If I don't smell anything, then, oh, there's nothing I smell. So I've just brought all of my senses to right now. And right now, I'm relatively safe here. So I can feel my breath is different just from doing that myself right now. And if you want to put 5, I sometimes I say to people, I suggest that you put the sticky note with the number 5 on it. And you put it by your sink in the morning, where you do your dishes, put one in your bedroom. So it reminds you to stop and just pause and orient to your space with your 5 senses.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful and can be used in so many scenarios, right? Like in life and in relationships and in business, like that's so practical. You can use it. And you can do it quietly too. Like there's so many exercises that, you know, you need to set up for, or you need to kind of be in the right headspace for, but you can grab onto that at any point, right?
Yeah.
It's so accessible.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another very, you know, this is something you can do anywhere, is hum or sing, because that stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the nerve that travels through, touches all of the organs. There's something we do called wooing.
Wooing?
That woo, like the sound woo.
Okay.
Woo. So there's this sort of vibration in the lips. Woo. You sound like a foghorn, right? Yeah. But that sort of vibration can help to settle. You know, mothers will hum or sing to babies. That's just a natural instinct, but that is a calming and attuning to the baby in that way, right? Yeah. So anything like that. I love the I love drumming too. Got my drum here. So yeah, that again, it's a sensory thing. So you're engaging your senses in right now. It's another thing about movement, you know, you're moving in right in the now. You're here with that.
Yeah, it sort of forces you to be present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's, I mean, this somatic experiencing, like the term and the practice is sort of somewhat new to me. I mean, I know friends who have been talking about it over the last sort of year or so, but it really seems like it's rooted in so much of how we cope, like how we like naturally kind of, you know, we may not call it that, but it's, I think it sounds like you're kind of tapping into what you do normally to support yourself, right? Like I know for me, like getting outside, going to that happy place and finding myself there will always sort of calm and relax me. So I think it sounds like it's really tapping in and figuring out and taking some time maybe to figure out what works for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in this time of uncertainty, we need to find things around us that are certain. So what is it that brings you some of that certainty? And I think one of the things that I notice is, you know, it's such a relief to me to see that flowers are coming up, that nature is doing its thing, regardless of this, you know, this virus is going on and everything is continuing to grow. That's certain. It's certain that that my cat is going to want to eat. but that you know, just that body, that little cat body that just is going on as usual, life as usual. Certainty. You know, find places in your day where there's certainty, and really just go right into those things. I think that's I noticed, or I heard somewhere something about all of a sudden people are hugging trees like mad. I think that that's part of what that is. It's like, oh, this is still growing and it's here and it's grounded and substantial and I can count on this and I know it's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great, Sally. I think those are a lot of things to think about, maybe some new for folks. And also sometimes it's just nice to be reassured from somebody, and somebody, especially like you, has so much experience and has worked with so many people, sort of kind of giving us permission almost, or kind of giving us an opportunity to do some of the things maybe we've been putting off, like if we're not finding that certainty. Or, you know, I think it's really important to find people in your life or people in your networks who you can go to get that permission, or that,
You bet,
you know, that nudge to do what you probably know deep down what you need to do. So I'm always grateful for a conversation with you, and especially to have you lead us through this and these exercises. You feel the difference, right? So I think
you know, and of course, just bringing your just breathing, right? Just the quickest way in.
Mm-hmm.
The quickest way in is the breath.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Just taking some breaths, right?
Yeah,
simple stuff.
Simple, yeah. But
Simple
sometimes
stuff.
hard to find, right? Sometimes it's buried under so much. So I'd love, I don't want to take up too much of your time. We're at about an hour here, but if anybody had any sort of kind of general questions about, you know, the work that you do or somatic experiencing in general, we won't go into sort of specific concerns or questions about our own lives, but if anybody had any questions about somatic experiencing or creativity or doodling, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. And also, if you need to pop off, like, feel free to leave if you need to. We'll probably stay on for another 5 minutes or so. But before, if people do have to leave in the chat part of this, Sally, can you do you want to let everybody know? I'll also share this on my email list, but your email address, you mentioned, if they wanted to get in touch with you to learn more,
Sure.
is, do you want to share that with everybody?
Yeah, you can email me at drawingonresilience@gmail.com. And I'm on Facebook too. And you can message me on Facebook if you need to get me.
And keep an eye on Sally's Facebook page, and she sometimes has workshops where you kind of intertwine your creativity and this type of work. Yeah,
that's, I think, I've been thinking about ways to do those online, which I may venture into just as more of an experiment, a freebie. So I'll keep you in mind for those, and they're a lot of fun. I'm kind of taking somatic work and spontaneous painting and creativity and bringing them together. So yeah, it's good fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And when those things are happening, I'll be sure to share it with folks through my pages and things like that as well.
All right.
Does anybody have any questions at all or comments?
I was just going to say that I'd love to take part in something like that, Sally, if you do. That sounds really interesting to connect the art. Yeah, I'd love to try that.
All right. Yeah, I'll keep you in mind.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Sally, I want to say thank you so much for being open to this and for sharing all of your wisdom and these exercises with us. And I think, again, to reiterate, like, use these now, but also keep them in your back pocket and use them whenever you need them. And also, we need to remember to take care of ourselves before we can tend to anybody else, whether that's people, relationships, community, business. Like, we need to make sure that we're filling ourselves up and taking care of ourselves. So I hope I hope some of these exercises and just like the awareness around our body and what we're experiencing right now. I hope that was helpful for folks to kind of tap into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks, Sally. Anything else you want to share with folks?
Yeah, well, just thank you for coming and spending time here. Really appreciate people showing up. And thank you, Tara, again, for inviting me on.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
I look forward to connecting with anybody that wants to talk further.
Yeah.
Good.